The Atlanta Braves kick off a three-game series with the Colorado Rockies tonight in Truist Park. Is this a must-win series if you want to stay ahead in the National League wildcard? We'll break down that and the debut of Cam Caminiti on this episode of Braves Today. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today for Tuesday, September 3rd. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, joined as always by my good friend, Christian Rauh, writer over at bravestoday.substack.com, the Braves Today Substack. And Christian, you have a really great piece coming out about the schedule. We're going to get to that in just a second. Also, Caminiti finally took the mound for the first time as a professional, and we got to figure out a listener asked us what to do about Drake Baldwin next season. But before we do that, I want to talk about tonight's series against the Rockies. Okay, three-game series at home, and given where you are, coming off of a 3-1 series loss to the Phillies, you're now 7 games back in the division, but also you are only half a game above the New York Mets for the final wildcard spot. No team in baseball has won more than 2 consecutive games right now, except for the New York Mets. They've won their last 5. Is it right to say that this series against the Rockies is a must-win for Atlanta if you want to keep pace with the New York Mets and hold on to your final wildcard spot?
Absolutely, Lindsay. 100%. This is a must-win series. The rest of the month of September, the next 25 games of the regular season are going to be a tough 25 games for the Atlanta Braves. But the easier side, and let me use that in quotations, the easier side of the schedule is right now. You are going to get it with the Colorado Rockies, and you see the Toronto Blue Jays. You have a couple teams below 500 that you have to take advantage of if you want to hold on to that lead, especially with the Mets breathing down your neck. So absolutely, this is for sure a must-win series. Rockies going 51-87. They're 4-6 in their last 10. In the month of August, they were 2-6 in all of their 3-game series. One of those wins, though, was against the Braves in August. So yes, they need to step up and they need to win this series. I don't want to say they need a sweep, but they need 2 or 3.
Yeah, sweeping a team is always incredibly tough to do, right? It's just so hard to sweep a team. But 19-50 is the Rockies' road record this season. And you alluded to that series out there in Colorado against the Rockies. It felt like part of the reason you lost that series, not part of the reason you lost that series, was that epic bullpen meltdown on Sunday, right? You were cruising to a win on Sunday before you have just a disastrous inning. What was that? That was the 8th inning. Luke Jackson comes in, gives up a home run to Jake Cave, of all people, scores 2 runs. Joe Jimenez comes in, 2 RBI single from Charlie Blackmon, another single from Ezekiel Tovar, another single from Ryan McMahon scores a run, a double from Brandon Rogers scores 2 more runs. There's your bullpen collapse, and something where a lot of the blame went on Joe Jimenez, but Luke Jackson is the one who lit a bunch of guys on before that, and Jimenez had to be rushed up. He was rushed out to the mound. He was not ready, as you can see by the 4 consecutive base hits that he gave up before he finally got a fly ball to end the inning. It feels like if you redo that series or redo that game 10 times, Atlanta wins most of them. But I also don't know if doing that inning the way that it happened in Atlanta, I feel like you're not as worried about the Rockies doing something like that in Atlanta as you are them doing it at home. So the fact that they are at home, I think, is big here. But I think the bigger overall picture isn't necessarily just this Rockies series. It's the fact, what you talked about, that the schedule right now, you have to make up ground because this is the easy part of the schedule. You have a series against the Dodgers left. You have some tough matchups here, but not a ton, right? You get Kansas City for 3, the final series of the year. We talked about them on today's First Pitch. Go find that wherever you get your podcasts. The Royals are dealing with a lot of issues right now. Vinny Pasquantino's out for the season. Matt Quasher, the manager, had to step away for personal reasons. You traded Yuli Gurriel to them and he had to leave the game. He re-injured that hamstring that had him on the Gwinnett injured list. So you're not as worried about that Royals matchup. You're not as worried about about a lot of these series here. Obviously, LA is going to be tough for 4 games, but you got to beat the Rockies. You got to beat the Blue Jays. You got to beat the Marlins. You need to beat Washington, and Atlanta's in the driver's seat, but you can't lose this series. You can't drop this series. Flip side of this, I talked about the schedule in the East. The Mets have a much tougher schedule than Atlanta, don't they?
Yeah, they're fourth toughest in all of baseball right now, according to Tankathon for the rest of the year. And if you want to, with a 531 strength of schedule left, but if you want to take out all the rest of the contenders, the three ahead of them are the San Francisco Giants, Colorado Rockies, and the Tampa Bay Rays. So really, out of all the teams still competing for a playoff spot, they have the toughest schedule left for the rest of the regular season. The three games, as you mentioned, in the second last series of the year against the Braves. They also have 7 against the Phillies, Lindsay, 3 against the Brewers, and 2 against the Boston Red Sox, who right now are still considered a contender, but they're starting to fall off a little bit as well. Interesting schedule for the Mets. I will say this, though. If we get to that second to last series of the year and the Mets are still hanging around, that means they're playing very good baseball.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to root for the Phillies, but you're going to need them to handle business over the Mets. And I think at this point, while yes, you can take advantage of a Philly collapse and still win the division, I think right now your focus has to be, and this is something Brian Stinker said. I think Matt Olson said this too about the focus is go out there and win every game you play. Like the focus is we got to win the game in front of us. We can't worry about what Philly's doing. We can't worry about the overall picture across the league. We have to go out and handle our business. And I think the big takeaway from that is you are leading your division. I'm sorry. You are controlling your own destiny, right? Because you are in that wild card spot now. You have possession of it. Possession's 9/10 of the law, right? As long as you can keep possession of that spot, so you can just finish the better record than the Mets, you will make the postseason. I do think, though, in this Colorado series, there's a couple things going for Atlanta that I think we've not really broken down and talked about because one, obviously, the Rockies aren't at home. That's a big deal simply because the Rockies at home are a different animal than on the road. I mentioned they're 19-50 on the road. They perform much worse from an offensive standpoint. But also, your 3 pitchers that you are throwing in this series, none of them faced the Rockies in Colorado. Okay. Your Tuesday matchup's a battle of lefties. Chris Sale versus Kyle Freeland, 7:20 p.m. That's on Valley Sports South, by the way. And I don't really think it matters who Chris Sale is matching up against. You feel like you have the advantage there, right? Like
Definitely.
that you should be favored to win any game Chris Sale starts because he's legitimately been the best pitcher in the National League this year. When I say you should be favored any game Chris Sale starts, right? His last 14 games, he has a 2.20 ERA. He has not allowed, like in that stretch, 14 games in that stretch, he has not once allowed more than 2 earned runs. It is absolutely absurd. And only one time did he not finish 5 innings, and that was against Milwaukee. He allowed 3 runs, 2 earned on 4 2/3 innings. Still struck out 10, though. So it's something where he has been virtually untouchable, unless you're the Oakland A's, this entire season. Oakland tagged him for 8 runs in 4 innings back in June, and I still don't understand what happened in that game. But outside of that, he's allowed more than 3 runs only twice all year, right? At Miami in April, he allowed 5 runs in 7 innings. He allowed 3 runs against Texas at home the very next start, and then since then, with the exception of that Oakland start, he's been virtually untouchable. And if this continues, he's obviously going to win the Cy Young. Is there anybody on this schedule down the stretch that you think could actually pose a risk to Chris Sale winning the Cy Young?
On the schedule, I guess I'd have to probably point out the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers would just be like the one that would come to my mind right away, just because that offense is completely nasty.
God.
You mentioned about these Braves starters, though. In
Yeah.
August, Grant Holmes, Max Fried, Spencer Schwellenbach were the 3 that went for the Braves. But as this one last thing before we really dive into the Rockies a little more, as a schedule as a whole, I know we're talking about at the beginning of this schedule that it's the easier side if you will, and let me put quotations out again, the easier side, that may not be the best thing for the Braves if you look at how they've worked this season, Lindsay. And let me explain. They technically have the seventh easiest schedule for the rest of the season in comparison to when we talk about the Mets being the fourth toughest. The Braves have the
Right.
seventh easiest. But when you look at their record across the league, they currently lead all of the National League with the best record against teams with winning records. They're 48 and 35 against teams against winning records. However,
Okay.
if that team is below 500, the Braves record is the third worst in the National League, only behind the Rockies and the Marlins. So it might not be the best thing that they're playing these losing teams. This might be their kryptonite. So this is another reason why they absolutely have to start off strong in these series against the Rockies, Blue Jays, and get ahead, because when we get to those Dodger series, those Met series, according to numbers, they're going to be just fine.
What a weird stat, man. What a
Yeah.
weird to have the best record in baseball against teams over 500 and one of the worst against teams below 500 is I don't know enough of the sample size. Like at what point that normalizes to know if this is noise or if this is legitimate. And obviously, you've had so many injuries this year where I feel like it's been a different team every month or so. But what a wild stat. And I guess that makes you feel better about all you have to do is get in the postseason. And these guys should be able to step up a little bit and to handle their business. But wild stat. Thank you for that. That was nuts. Speaking of, if you want more great insights like that, Christian has a schedule breakdown piece over on the Braves Today Substack, bravestoday.com is where you can find that. Fantastic stuff there. Go support that. That's where we drop all of our takeaways. That's where we drop our analysis pieces. Go check that out. Okay, so Kyle Freeland versus Chris Sale on Tuesday night. Wednesday, Bradley Blaylock versus Charlie Morton. Blaylock's newer pitcher, 1-1, 4.98 ERA, 14 strikeouts. Morton obviously is a veteran. He's one of the oldest starting pitchers in baseball. 7-7, 4.26. I feel like no matter who Colorado threw up there, such a young team that they have, I feel like you trust Charlie Morton to go out there, provided you get the good Charlie Morton, which he's been the good Charlie Morton pretty consistently regularly. He hasn't allowed more than 3 runs in a start over his last 4. You have to go back to Milwaukee in early August to see where he gave up more than 3 earned runs. Atlanta definitely has the advantage here from a rotation perspective in this one, I feel like almost obviously.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. If you look back at the past series in August, and I think this stat can translate other than most at Coors Field, but 24 strikeouts just on the starters alone for the Rockies. They gave up 24 strikeouts between Holmes, Fried, and Schwellenbach in only 16 innings. So I don't have the numbers of the bullpen in front of me, but they do a lot of swing and miss stuff.
Right.
So I'm gonna go ahead and give you my first prediction of the series. I think 2 of the 3 Brave starters, Lindsay, have double-digit strikeouts.
Ooh, you heard it here first. Speaking of, if you're a betting site and you want us to give people a link to let folks bet on things like that, hit me up. Contact at bravestoday.com. Email me. All right. Series finale. Austin Gomber versus Ronaldo Lopez. All 3 games, by the way. These are all night games. They're all 7:20. There's no getaway day here because Atlanta's at home for their next series against Toronto that starts on Friday. So Ronaldo Lopez, Austin Gomber. Gomber's a lefty, obviously 4-10, 4.69 ERA. Faced Atlanta once last year, only made it 2 2/3 innings, 2 runs on 4 hits. I believe that was an injury impacted start. I don't think he just came out early. He only threw like 40 pitches. Lopez has never faced Colorado as a starter. He was on the injured list last time, so he was not in that series earlier this month. But he's not allowed more than 1 earned run in his last 3 starts. Technically 4 because we have to count that Mets start where he left early. But he's 17 innings, 3 runs allowed, 23 strikeouts to 5 walks. Seems obvious. You like the matchup here as well. You like Atlanta to be favored in this one. And I think the only reason I'm not calling a sweep is because it's just so hard to sweep teams in MLB. So hard to beat any team 3 times. And it's not just me saying that. On the Brave State podcast, I talked to John Smoltz. We had Tom Glavine on. They've all said these same things. It's hard to beat any team 3 times. But if there's a series where you feel like Atlanta could sweep, this is the one. The Rockies have given up over 800 runs this year. They have actually given up more runs than the Chicago White Sox. The Rockies have given up the most runs in all of baseball. It's a negative 211 run differential, second worst in baseball. Obviously, Atlanta is plus 61 because this rotation's been great. So you definitely feel like if there's a series you could sweep, this is the one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. If I had to say one concerning of the start, I guess I'd have to say the Morton one, just because of what we saw in the past start of Morton, where we weren't sure if he should stay in or go and whatnot. So I think he's
Yeah.
set up for a nice rebound. But when you have Chris Sale starting it and you have Lopez as the bookend, count me in for this. Is perfect timing to have this rotation as it is when you must need a series win. But if you had to give me some sort of concern, I'd have to point at that Morton start.
Yeah. Every now and then, Charlie Morton will have a bad one. It just happens. But I feel good. I'm going to say 2 out of 3 simply because I just don't think you can count on a sweep. But if there's a sweep to come, I think it's going to be in this one. In just a second, I had a chance to sit down on the holiday yesterday and go back and rewatch the major league debut of Cam Caminiti as well as Carter Holton, the second round pick. We'll break down both of those as well as answer a listener question about Drake Baldwin next. Welcome back to the Braves Today podcast. Lindsay, Crosby, Christian Rauh here with you. Reminder, you can find all of our written work at bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. But so Cam Caminiti, first round pick for Atlanta, debuted over the weekend, pitching for the Augusta Green Jackets. It was their final home series of the year. They're going to wrap their season up on the road. Carter Holton, I think he was Friday. Carter Holton was Saturday. But Caminiti first, and it came at a great time. He was added to the MLB Pipeline Top 100 over the weekend. They had somebody graduate. They stuck him in there. So first professional start. He's done some work in Northport at the spring training complex. First time he's been on a mound. So, of course, he got this.
A lot of scouts split on whether the curve or the slider will end up better for Caminiti. MLB Pipeline says the slider is slightly ahead right now. Back to that slider. It locks up Mitchell, and there it is, the first professional strikeout for Cam Caminiti. He freezes Blake Mitchell. Back-to-back batters retired.
Blake Mitchell of the Kansas City Royals, they're one of their top prospects, by the way. Mostly a catcher, but good offensive player. So not like he struck out some scrub there. This was an interesting outing. And I think part of the reason why I struggled a little bit with this is having the draft so late, I think did Caminiti a disservice. He came out 95-96 pretty early in the start. But by the end of the first inning, he was already down to 93, 94, and he sat in the low 90s by the second inning. He went 3 total innings, 3 hits, 1 run allowed, no walk to 4 strikeouts, threw 41 pitches. 31 of those were strikes, so hitting the zone a lot. But that layoff obviously impacted him from a stamina, from a velocity standpoint. I don't think there's anything to worry about there. The big takeaway for me in watching Caminiti is he's incredibly athletic. And so because of that, his mechanics are pristine. So a little background there. He played center field. He played center field and pitched both. Atlanta likes to get those two-way guys or those dual sport guys. Spencer Schwellenbach, example of this. He was a shortstop at Nebraska, the starting shortstop on a Division I, a Power 5 school, who also was their closer. They made him into a starter. A.J. Smith-Shawver was a quarterback on the football team, the same high school as Bobby Witt Jr., actually. So they love these super athletic dudes, and you can really tell that he is athletic, and it does a really good job at helping his mechanics, keeping his release point pretty consistent, pretty pristine. And you heard in the video there, they talked about both the slider and the curveball. I agree with them. I don't know which one is better. I think the curveball was better yesterday. But one, very small sample size, 41 pitches, and that is all the professional sample size we have. All those squad things down in Florida, those aren't televised. There's no footage of those. But Atlanta does have a history of making prospects rapidly improve their sliders, okay? So they did this with A.J. Smith-Shawver, so look for this next year. He may come out and almost never throw the curveball. This is something Atlanta does, where they will have a guy like temporarily shelve their curveball. They'll just make them throw a ton of sliders rapidly to get better with it, to get more confident with it. And then once they do that, bring it back. We saw that with Smith-Shawver in 23. We saw the next step of that this spring where they made him throw a ton of changeups, even times you would not want to throw a changeup in spring training. They're making him throw a ton of changeups just to get more confidence in the pitch. So I don't think this pitch mix you saw is going to be what you see early next year. And I think that's why some of the Braves prospect pitching stats can sometimes look underwhelming. People would say Smith-Shawver had a bad year in AAA. They're having him focus on specific pitches. They don't care if he wins or loses the game. They want him to get better as a pitcher. Overall, I think it was a good outing, and I think you can see why he's probably the top pitching prospect in the system right now, despite having made a grand total of 3 innings of pitches in his professional career.
I just can't. I'm still shocked that he fell in the lap of the Braves at 24. Like, and
they got him at a slot deal. They didn't have to go over for him.
Yeah, like the Braves needed more help with pitching prospects, right? Hey, not complaining whatsoever. Love that. The Braves have had some of the most success in all of baseball when it comes to draft picks. In the last 5 years, no other team in baseball has had more draft picks make their MLB debut. The Braves have 16, no matter what pick for what round. The Braves have 16 of their draft picks making the MLB. Nobody has more than that in the last 5 years of baseball. So you got to be excited for what they're doing in the minor leagues. Caminiti, get your first taste of him. That's really cool. I personally, when I saw the start, I watched the 3 innings as well. I was a big fan of those breaking balls. So I'm really interested to see about that slider situation that you brought up, Lindsay. I didn't really put those two together when you're talking about Smith-Shawver. Makes a lot of sense now. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens with that slider now.
Yeah, and to that point of no team has had more debuts in Atlanta from 19 through 23. So I have not updated this for the 24 draft yet, but 19 through 23, no team devoted a larger percentage of their MLB draft bonus pool to pitching prospects than Atlanta. Most teams will draft more pitchers than hitters. That's common. Like all but like 4 teams did that. But Atlanta's the only team that exceeded 60% of their bonus pool money paid to pitching prospects in that stretch. And it makes sense. Your major league roster, eight or 9 of your spots are locked up long term. Like you don't need a ton of position player prospects. You just need guys with the ceilings to overtake somebody on the major league roster. So it makes sense they would devote the quantity to the pitching prospects, but they've paid for quality as well. And I think the reputation a little bit also helps them with some of these deals. Again, so the reports we got on Caminiti, part of the reason why he signed at slot and not under slot when he could have gone to college, I'm sorry, not over slot when he could have gone to college, was just the appreciation and respect for Atlanta's pitching development and how many guys they can make into better pitchers and put them into the league. And so part of the reason they got that. Carter Holton, he was the team's 2nd round pick out of Vanderbilt. He also made his debut, I believe that was Saturday. A little bit rockier of a debut. And this, I'm really chalking this up to how long it's been since Vanderbilt's season ended. Because Vanderbilt didn't make the College World Series, so they were done in early June. And his mechanics were a bit of a mess. I don't know if that's entirely his fault. It looked like his release point really varied in the 2 innings. He went 3 runs on 1 hit with 4 walks and 3 strikeouts in 2 innings for Augusta on Saturday. His release point really struggled, and I couldn't really tell if it was he wasn't comfortable with the baseball or he wasn't comfortable with his landing point, right? Like where he comes down on the mound. But the fact, like when he did look like he was comfortable, the fastball looked pretty good. The velocity doesn't blow you away. It was sitting low 90s, but it's one of those kind of new age. He's listed at 5'11", kind of Spencer Strider, 6 foot tall, one of those shorter guys. And so because of that, it comes in very flat. So all of the backspin you got, the induced vertical break, it really stays up in the zone more than a hitter thinks it's going to. So I really like that. I think Atlanta's kind of found a niche of going after those guys that maybe aren't your physical monsters, your 6'4", 6'5s. They have a couple guys in that draft class who are huge. But guys like Carter Holton who are shorter but have that that low VAA and can really get the ride up in the zone. And then he's throwing a slider and a changeup. I watched him at Vandy, and the slider had some of the same issues as you saw at Vandy. When the shape was there, it had a little 2-plane break to it. It was really good. When the shape wasn't there, it was flat, mostly just horizontal movement, and I didn't think it was that great. But the changeup, I think, is really underrated. He had really good tunneling with the fastball. They looked exactly the same halfway to the plate. And so you could see Augusta's a great camera angle, by the way. You could see how guys would get set up with one, he'd go to the other. So I thought that was interesting. A little more work to do here than Caminiti, but there's things to like about Holton. But obviously, this is one even smaller sample size. I think he threw maybe 30 strikes on 55 pitches, but only 2 innings because of all the walks and everything. But things to like, but obviously not a finished product here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Here's my biggest question, though, when you're looking at these pitchers. We've seen Waldrop come up. We've seen Schwellenbach come up from that AA to major league jump. So let's maybe put it in perspective here. We're talking about these pitchers right now, but we're probably not going to see them till what, 2027, 2028? You think that's a good ETA for these guys, or you think we'll see them sooner?
So probably sooner. Caminiti, I think, could be late 26 to 27. He has everything you need to be a fast mover, right? It's all going to come down to health. How many innings can you get underneath him next year? Holton, I think, has a little more work to do, but he is also a college guy. He's already 21. And so I think the timeline on them, you're looking at that third season, you want to see them up. So 25, 26, you want to see him up, threatening the end of 26 into 27. So 27 is probably in retrospect, a good call by you there. If it's 28 on Caminiti, I'm not going to be bothered. If it's 28 on Holton, I'm going to be I feel like you're a little behind schedule. But also injuries could impact this. You've seen so many Braves prospects get injured. Pitching prospects have elbow issues or shoulder issues and things like that. So neither of these guys are going to pitch for Atlanta down the stretch, obviously. They're all years away. But I can see the promise in both these guys, and I can see why they made the picks. But a guy who you could see for Atlanta down the stretch or next year, Drake Baldwin. We had a question from a listener on YouTube, Yoemi1219. Joemi1219? Anyway, asked on yesterday's show and down in the comments below. Baldwin and Tromp have both absolutely raked at AAA this year. Those two are big leaguers. What do we do with them in the offseason? I know Tromp's MLB stats weren't great, but they weren't bad either. So, Joe, thanks for the question. Appreciate that. If you have questions for the show, by the way, drop them. If you're on YouTube, drop them in the comments. If you're on audio, you can tweet at me at Crosby Baseball. You can tweet at the show at Braves_today. You can email us, contact@bravetoday.com. Tons of ways to get them to us. And by the way, if you're on YouTube, do us a favor and go subscribe to the audio feed. We've partnered with Blee for this show. We want them to show that the Atlanta Braves have a good fan base who can invest in their products. So go out and subscribe to the channel there. But I think what happens with Baldwin and Tromp completely depends on Travis d'Arnaud. Travis d'Arnaud, 35 years old, having a good season. You feel good. He still can play at a major league level. And his contract officially is up, but the team has a club option for him. And I think this is entirely up to what he wants to do. If Travis d'Arnaud wants to come back, then the Braves pick up that option and he is back for 25 or 24. 25 is right. Yeah, this is 24 now. This reminds me of the Tyler Flowers situation. He was in a similar situation. He had an option. He chose to retire. He had more offensive issues than d'Arnaud does, but he chose to retire, and he is now working for the team. He is now, I want to say he's like a special assistant in baseball operations. He helps with game planning. He helps with coaching catchers. Like he's around the team and he's working for the team. And I think Travis d'Arnaud's in that same situation. If he wants to keep playing, they're going to bring him back. If he wants to retire, they're going to let him retire. And in that case, it's a battle between Tromp and Baldwin. Tromp has the edge because he has major league experience. He's played in multiple years, 29 years old. Like Joe said, struggled a little bit in the majors this year. 19 games, batted .250, struck out 17 times in 19 games. But in AAA, 332, 398, 508 in 51 games, 7 homers, 23 walks and 39 strikeouts. But I think Drake Baldwin is special. 23 years old, represented the team at the Futures game this year. I was there in person. He was super impressive. Hit a home run in the game. I thought he should have been MVP. He didn't get it. I think Cam Collier got it. I thought Baldwin should have gotten it. But what he's done in AAA has been amazing. And caveat here, I know we're running long on time, guys. Thanks for sticking with us here. You have to throw out the AA numbers, okay? 52 games in AA Mississippi, 244, 313, 337, 4 home runs. Double-A Mississippi, so Trustmark Field, is the hardest ballpark to hit for power in all of the minor leagues. From a park factor perspective, it's either worst or second worst. I want to say Tri-City, the Dust Devils, I want to say it's high A for the Angels. That might be the worst, but one of those two is the worst. The other one's the second worst. Incredibly hard to hit for power there, the dimensions, the wind, all of that stuff. In AAA, 57 games in AAA for Baldwin, 305, 414, 482. So an 896 OPS, 10 homers, more walks and strikeouts, 43 to 39. And it's because all of the inputs are good. We have StatCast info for AAA. 90th percentile exit velocity of 107. MLB average is just under 103. So he's producing power at a easily 60 grade level, if not a little bit higher than that. And then he's doing really well with zone contact, 85% in the zone. Great contact rate. You're looking for high 70s, low 80s there. He's easily above that. He's still chasing a little over 20% of the time. I feel like that's manageable. As long as it doesn't get too high when he gets to the majors, I think you'll be okay. He does hit too many ground balls. His average launch angle is 5.8 degrees. I don't think launch angle by itself is incredibly predictive. You want to see what the tightness is. But either way, the fact that it's so low means he's hitting a lot of ground balls. So you want to see that fixed. But Baldwin, I think, can be, within 2 seasons, I think can be a very good major league catcher. It all depends on what happens with Travis d'Arnaud. If d'Arnaud comes back, I think that you see Baldwin in the minors for another season, which is going to suck. But I do think it's possible if d'Arnaud comes back that maybe Tromp gets traded and Baldwin becomes your number 3 next year, with the plan of, if nothing else, the year after that, he would be on your major league roster while d'Arnaud is gone. At the same time, Atlanta loves having extra catchers in AAA. They carried 3, and Sandy Leon, the veteran, upper 30s veteran, Tromp, and Baldwin. So it's possible they keep both Tromp and Baldwin around next year if d'Arnaud is gone.
I'll be quick because I know we're good, but I think you're right. I think if d'Arnaud stays around, and I was going to ask you, but you answered it. If d'Arnaud stays around, I think Trump can be on his way out because I don't know if they're going to want to hold Baldwin back as much as they have to make him
right.
Even if they do keep Trump, Baldwin will be the everyday AAA catcher and all that good stuff. So, but I do want to see Baldwin in Major League. I want him to have an actual shot at trying to make the Major League roster in spring training next year.
Yeah, I saw him in spring. I thought he was great. I watched some of his starts in Gwinnett this year. I'm impressed with what he is. I think he can be a really good major league regular. I think mixing him in with Sean Murphy is the best way to go. We've obviously been very cautious with Murphy's workload the last 2 seasons, a little bit of injury dealing with that and stuff like that. But I think that Baldwin being able to come up and Murphy having a 2/3 timeshare, 2 games to 1 game for Baldwin would not be the worst thing in the world to ease him in. And then if one of them gets hurt, I feel like you have trust in the other to be the guy for 3 weeks or a month or whatever you have to do. So I like the potential of Baldwin. I think he's one of the best position player prospects in the system. I don't think they should trade him simply because just you could never have enough catchers. And I think the organization feels like that with having those 3 guys in Gwinnett all season. This has been another great episode of Braves Today. Reminder, if you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment down below or a question if you haven't. And do us a favor. Go subscribe to the audio feed. It really does mean a lot. We really show believe that Braves country is behind their team. Until next time, though, this has been